And Instagram is always its own little funny thing. All right. So, here we go. All right, Gabby, we're talking about, it's another Drinks and Deconstruction episode. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking a raspberry infused water with also lemon.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not drinking any alcohol today because it's lunchtime. So
yeah.
we're pretending that you're not allowed to drink at lunchtime. I've got a Coke Zero because, cheers. Yep. So we're talking about masturbation and like basically in the Bible, masturbation in the Bible, purity culture, all of that. And I know that you have a story, and I don't have any question that I feel like I could ask you to enter into that story in a way that would make me feel like I wasn't being really icky.
Yeah, that's
so
okay.
So voluntarily.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to talk about it. So masturbation in my testimony was such a big deal. So, when I was 14, I was in 9th grade. One of my classmates talked about the first concept of masturbation to me. I didn't even know what it was. Yeah. He's like, "Oh, you don't like touch yourself?" I was like, "What do you mean?" And I remember that night, whatever, I masturbated, and whatever feeling I felt, I was like, "Oh my God, I shouldn't be feeling this," right?
Yeah.
And I remember I liked it. I mean, I was a 14-year-old girl. Right. I enjoyed it.
It feels good.
Yes, it does feel good. So I would do it here and there. And then when I got into high school, I started masturbating a bit more frequently. And then I'd start watching pornography. And I remember, I always felt bad.
Yeah.
Every time I do it, I feel like I shouldn't be doing this, right? Because then I would go to church, and then I'd feel like I had this big secret I couldn't share with anybody.
Well, and because at church, you were in a full-on purity culture church.
Yeah.
So everything sexual was a sin.
Yeah.
If you weren't married.
Exactly. And so I was like, I can't tell anybody about this. But then also I felt so bad. And I would try, I would stop, and then I would start again until I think one day I just shared with someone from my church. She was kind of like a woman leader.
Yeah.
That I struggled with masturbation, right?
Which, one of the most normal things in the world that is very healthy was put on you as a struggle.
Yes. And so when I shared with her, she's like, "Oh, okay, so you have an addiction." Great.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
you have an addiction. We went from I masturbate. Did you tell her about the pornography?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
masturbate. I watch pornography, and then we went from there straight to addiction, which is diagnoses kind of an addiction. When I think of addiction, I think of people drugged out on the street.
Yeah.
Alcoholic person who is absent from their family and right.
Well, it's the same thing, but just
apparently, it's the same thing.
It is the same thing, right?
And she was totally qualified from that one conversation.
Right. To be you have an addiction. So she recommended an app that I was on for years. It was supposed to, and I don't remember the name, but it was supposed to be for people who struggled with addiction. But other people on there had alcohol and drug addiction. And so,
right.
Yeah. And so I remember it would show you on the homepage how many days that you've been free from your addiction. And then if you fell, you'd have to then restart the number. So there's one point I was like, 365 days that I haven't masturbated. And then if I did, I'd have to go back to day number 0 because and it'd be a community you could talk to people I'm struggling today. I really feel, and so I remember I was being on this app and I was like, okay, trying I felt good when I saw the number go up so high. It's been this many times that I haven't. And then I would masturbate and then go back down to 0.
Ugh.
And this was for years I was on this app, and she was on it too because she said she also struggled with it.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
okay. That's kind of awkward.
Yeah.
That's a little bit. Too much.
Yeah.
You would see her on that app
because you could see people's profile and see how many days free they were.
You.
Yeah.
You're leader at church.
Yeah.
You could go. You didn't have to friend them. You just go to anybody.
Well, we friended each other on the app.
Gosh.
Yeah.
So she friended a teenager.
Yeah.
How old?
Yeah.
16?
I was
15.
Yeah, 15, 16.
15-year-old on an app that revealed when she masturbated.
Yeah. So I would see she was doing better than me, or
grossly inappropriate behavior. That is I don't even know. I've been through, like, as a clergy person, I go through sexual ethics training all the time. Like, it is very regular that you have to do it, because a lot of, like, it's important. Boundary training, all that kind of stuff is really important. Also, the insurance companies make that happen because of all the scandals and awful things. But, like, there is none of those trainings that would come close to saying that was in any way okay. Wow.
I don't know. It was normal to me at the time.
So you would see that about her.
I would see it on her profile.
And she would see it about you.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so I think she'd be like, oh, praying for you, or like, it was trying to be a way to keep each other accountable, and like, let's pray. Or like, we would also start doing like devotionals on the Bible app together. Like, okay, trying to help you, not engage in your addiction. And so, that became a huge part of my story. I remember, like, before I went to college, I was like, okay, I'm so tired of like struggling with this. I went and bought a journal, and I was like, I'm going to start journaling my prayers so that I become more holy, and I stop like masturbating and watching porn or whatever. And when I went to college, I remember I went to Bible study, and like they're like, anyone here want to rededicate their life to God or feel like they've fallen away? And like, of course, I raised my hand. I was like, I struggle with X, Y, and Z. I got prayed over, and then that's when I started like reading my Bible more often, and I felt like my God freed me of my desires. But however, it wasn't free. I would still masturbate here and there.
Well, because you are a human being.
Yeah. But I did. It was way like it would be a while. So yeah. But then when I was in college, now, like, when I got asked to say my story, one of them was at Crew, like, it's called Crew Real Life, Share Your Real Life Story. I remember I put, oh my God, yeah.
Oh, geez.
So I had to write up a whole testimony. So it's like, okay, it's part of my testimony that God freed me of my addiction. I have to talk about this.
Your addiction to masturbation and pornography.
Yes.
Right.
So I wrote in there, like, I used to be a pornography and masturbation addict. And I remember, and I wrote the whole thing, and God and blah, blah, blah. And one of the crew leaders checked over my testimony. She's like, you can't really say the word masturbation because it's going to probably trigger people. So like, remove it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, okay. Also, I just want to say this. It is so deeply wrong.
Yeah.
That you were given that label of addict in high school for something that is very normal.
Yeah.
By someone who is in no way qualified to even say anything about that.
Yeah.
To the point that, like, that was part of your identity.
It really was.
That is so awful. And I just want to name that.
Yeah.
That's not okay. It was deeply wrong. And yeah, it was just deeply wrong.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, for the longest, up and even until like now, I still have like issues with all that, But yeah, I said it multiple times in my testimony. It wasn't just testimonies that I said in front of people. When I was doing a missions trip, I had to share with 30. All of us intimately would share our testimonies. And so I would say, I used to struggle with this. God freed me out of it.
You would say this, like,
men and women. It was so awkward to talk about it too, because like it's kind of taboo. But
and it was expected.
Yes,
that you would talk about that specific part of your life.
Well, you have to bring up everything.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
I mean, one of my friends at that little intimate 30 people mission trip talked about how he struggled with same-sex attraction.
Oh no.
And like that was, I felt so bad. And like his ex-girlfriend was there, and she got mad at him and stuff. No. She's like, "You didn't tell me." I'm like, "Bro, he just shared something intimate. Can you give him a sec?" Like,
wow.
Yeah, it was just very messy. Like, why are we oversharing? It's always like spell out your dirty laundry in front of Christians love to do that.
It feels like, I don't know, like just like voyeuristic, like, I don't know. It just feels not okay. Yeah.
And it wasn't just in front of people. When I would date someone, I'd have to share my story. Like, oh, I struggled with this. Just,
when? Like at the beginning?
Yeah, that's what was like. That was like what we were supposed to do. Like when you would go on a date with someone and be like, "So what's your testimony?" Yeah.
And that means like I've got to spill all my guts.
Yeah, because then they can decide if they want to continue to date you or not, and it's better to decide this early.
This is awful.
And I remember one of the guys I shared with him. He's like, "Oh, I don't like your response. Like I don't like that you said that." And so I think he was like, "I'm not interested in." Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
So. And like 30 people, Was that the max? I'm just curious.
No, the biggest crowd I've shared it in front of was 400 people.
400 people?
Yeah. Yeah.
How did that feel in the moment?
Oh, I mean, I was nervous to share
Yeah.
my story, and then at the end, everyone clapped for me. So I don't know. I don't know. I wasn't like, it's an awkward thing to say, and then that was only one line. Then I spoke about the rest of my story and what God did in my life. But yeah, I mean, it's just awkward because there's like men and women. Like now they know that
Well, it's such a private thing, and it was treated as a sin.
Yeah.
Right. I think that maybe there's part of me that wants to be like, I feel like it might be helpful for more people to just, feel comfortable talking about that.
Yeah.
In an appropriate way and settings and that kind of stuff, just because it doesn't need to be taboo, and the taboo of it is like really unhelpful. But there's a verse in the Bible.
Oh.
Right? That was used to tell, or the passage that was used to say that like this is a sin.
Okay.
So
yes,
will you read that verse from? And we're reading from the New Revised Standard Updated Edition, which is what academics say is the most reliable English translation right now.
Cool. So the verses, just so people know, it's Genesis 38, verse 8 to 10 that I'm going to read. So it says, "Then Judah said to Onan, 'Go into your brother's wife and perform the duty of a brother-in-law to her. Raise up offspring for your brother.' But since Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, he spilled his semen on the ground whenever he went into his brother's wife, so that he would not give offspring to his brother. What he did was displeasing in the sight of the Lord, and he put him to death also."
Okay. I mean, okay, so this...
God.
So if you read it,
Yeah.
on the face of it, it sounds like God killed Onan, not for masturbation,
Yeah.
right? But for pulling out early.
Yeah.
But for us, it was masturbation.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what it was.
Right.
Okay, so in the Bible, in the Old Testament, there was this idea. There was something called fictive kinship. So it's a very patriarchal culture. Women can't own things, and if a husband dies, the oldest male sort of inherits the things, takes over, and is responsible for caring for his mom, make sure she has all the things that she needs and is taken care of and all that stuff in the way that a father would. However, sometimes men die before producing a male offspring.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a problem in the ancient world when you have this very patriarchal culture. It's a problem that you have to solve. And in the Bible, there are verses that say basically the way they dealt with it in that ancient Semitic culture was that if that happened, if a man died and a married man died and his spouse had not had a male child, then the closest male relative, so in this case the brother-in-law, so it's the brother marries the wife, this brother dies, this other brother, they're in the same family, is married, but he has to sleep with his brother's widow in order to produce a male heir. And when he does that, the male heir will inherit the things, and the problem is solved. Even though it's a baby, the mom will take care of and will like manage all the stuff for the baby. So that's what's going on there. Okay, so in this setting, Onan's father, when Onan's brother dies, Onan's father says, okay, you know the rules. You have to sleep with her and produce a male heir. Because if he didn't, she's out of luck. She's on the street. She doesn't own anything. There's nothing in society that ultimately protects her.
Right.
Hopefully she's got a gracious family. But like there's nothing in the rules that protects her. So that's his job. And what he does is he prevents her from having a male heir. And that is the sin.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty horrible thing. Like, I mean, the way it's that culture, I'm not going to make judgments on that culture right now. But basically, if you do something, or if you refuse to do something that will stop your brother's widow from like being destitute on the street, that's a horrible thing to refuse to do that.
Yeah.
And so and sex in this culture was not a mutual thing. It's something, the way that Dan McClellan says it, is something that an active sexual agent does to a passive sexual object, right? So it wasn't like he was cheating on his wife and it felt like that. Like it was his job. And that's the sin.
Yeah.
And that's why, God puts him to death, which still, that seems a little extreme.
Right.
But it's not talking about masturbation.
Right.
It's not talking about pulling out early.
Right.
It's talking about contraception. It's not talking about any of that. And this is the verse.
Yeah.
This is the verse that people use. And it's just not okay.
Yeah. The context you gave makes way more sense than what people were interpreting this before to be. Like,
right.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you don't have to have any source except the Bible to figure that out.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't expect an average person to like read all of the biblical laws and then go back and apply them to the narrative here. That's the responsibility of people whose full-time job that is to communicate that. That's the responsibility of like a pastor to make that effort. But like, it's not talking about that. It's just not.
That's nice that's been another passage taken out of context.
Right. How does that hit for you?
So I'm like semi-familiar with this passage. Is that what you said it? I remember people talking about, yeah, God killed someone for masturbating.
Yeah.
And so this wasn't like honed in my, we used other verses to talk about why we should remain pure and not do those things. I'm not surprised. I feel like the more I deconstruct, the more I hear about stuff like, oh, this was not the context, but our dogma has said that it is.
Right.
So
I want to, like, I'm not a therapist, okay? Yeah. I don't ever claim to be a therapist. I'm not a therapist. Okay. I'm not trained in therapy. I'm not trained in psychological diagnoses.
Yeah.
None of that. However, there are manuals, there's psychological manuals that are used to diagnose people that, again, you can't fully use them, but they can help you understand what medical professionals define as addiction, for example.
Okay.
Now, pornography addiction. So there's two. In America, because Americans have to be different and extra, we have something called the DSM, and it's updated every once in a while. And then let me just make sure I get this right. I've got it over here. And then in
what does DSM stand for?
Diagnostic. Come on. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
Okay.
And then the ICD is what's used in Europe and most of the world. And that is the International Classification of Diseases.
Okay.
Okay. So they're important for a number of reasons. It's standardized. It's like academic consensus. Smart people get in a room and make a decision as to where the line is. And it's important also for insurance, because once you are diagnosed if you've got a diagnosable thing, then insurance will pay for medicine, whatever.
Right.
Okay. So the DSM does not classify pornography or masturbation in any way as addiction.
Oh.
And
that's nice.
And so the DSM did and there's also like compulsive behaviors. And there was some debate in the most recent, when they're making the most recent revision about a compulsive sexual behavior disorder. They did not include that in the DSM. However, the ICD does have compulsive sexual behavior disorder, which is CSBD. CSBD. And so basically, it's any sexual behavior, pornography use, masturbation, having sex, whatever it is. And it has a criteria for whether or not this sexual behavior is considered a compulsive sexual behavior disorder, right? It's a problem. Now, anything that like makes your life difficult, uncomfortable, like that's why you go to a therapist. They can help you process it, but unless you meet these criteria, they're not going to diagnose you as having this disorder, as reaching that level, right? Yeah. And I would say, for me, at least in my head, this is when you say addiction. Right. Addiction is like this thing that is wrecking your life, and that like you need treatment. You need to go to AA. You need to whatever it is, right? So I've got it right here.
Okay.
The diagnostic criteria.
Please.
And are you okay with answering these on a podcast?
100%. Please go ahead.
So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 diagnostic criteria. And just so we know, the requirement is that you meet all 6.
Okay.
You have to have all of them in order to have CSBD.
Okay.
Right, you ready? Number 1, a persistent pattern of failure to control intense, repetitive sexual impulses or urges resulting in repetitive sexual behavior. So it could be masturbation, pornography use, whatever.
No.
Okay. No. So already you don't have it, but just for the sake of everybody who's listening and watching live, the next one is the sexual behavior becomes a central focus of a person's life, leading to neglect of health, personal care, or other. So like so much a focus of your life that you were neglecting your health, your personal care, or other interests.
And no.
Right. You didn't neglect. You didn't stop eating because
I continued.
Okay. So right now we're 0 for 2.
Okay.
Continued sexual behavior despite negative consequences, relational distress, work problems, that kind of thing.
No.
Okay, that's 0 for 3.
Okay.
Repeated unsuccessful efforts to control or significantly reduce the behavior.
No.
So 0 for 4. Engaging in sexual behavior as a coping mechanism for negative mood states or stress.
I'll say yes, though.
Yes. Okay. So 1 for 5.
Mm-hmm.
Duration. Symptoms must be present for at least 6 months and cause significant distress or impairment in important areas of functioning. So
I don't think
6 months of significant distress or impairment in important areas of functioning.
No.
Okay,
no.
So out of the 6 criteria, that it's required to have all 6.
Yeah.
You have 1. 1. And this is what really hurts me on your behalf.
Yeah.
Is because so long. And it's not just you. Like you are present, you're telling a story that is not just your story.
Yeah.
It's so many people's story. And having that label and seeing yourself as this sort of deranged, perverted.
Yeah. And I think that's why I believed all the sermons I watched about being wicked and depraved. I'm like, yes, I am, because I have this problem. And why can't I just not masturbate so that I could be more holy?
Yeah.
That's, I mean, I know like the facts now. And like, when I talked to my partner about it, he was like, it just sounds like you masturbated at a regular amount of time.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I never thought about it that way. Now I'm hearing this and I'm like, that makes sense. I still like, I can't, to this day, I feel like I can't masturbate. I have such trauma around it, and like, I don't want to watch porn. I'm like, I'm going to become an addict again, even though I know I clearly was not.
Right.
Still.
Well, and that's why we go to therapy, right?
Yeah.
Because like, this is the kind of long-term damage it does.
Yeah.
Because masturbation is a very healthy thing. And I don't want you to feel like it's happening again, that I'm saying you're unhealthy.
No, yeah.
I'm trying to give you grace and permission to let go of the thing.
Yeah.
But like the average, like it's not that people randomly masturbate.
Right.
The average for men is 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And the average for women is twice a week.
Yeah.
So it's not just like this random, it's like a common part of life.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what's really particularly sad to me. I experienced a similar thing. I was never called an addict.
Yeah.
But similar things that I learned, my own life, like all of the things, like I felt really bad all the time for a long, long time, for decades.
Yeah.
And, and so it's just sad that it's like, it's peddled as addiction when, I mean, yes, anything can become a problem. And these are the same kind of criteria they have for like alcoholism, that kind of things.
Right.
Like it's like, can you say like, I'm not going to drink this week and not drink? Yeah. Okay. You're probably not an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Is it like affecting your work? No, probably not an alcoholic. Do you binge drink? No, probably not. Like, and you have to, so it's like anything can be a problem. But this just wasn't one.
Yeah. I really thought I like was severely like just deeply troubled.
And I'm so sorry for that.
No, it's okay. I mean, it's not
I just
really
feel like
okay,
it's
but-
not okay, but I just feel like on behalf of religion, somebody should own up and say, I'm sorry, that shouldn't.
No, I appreciate that. You have to really, in the deconstruction, one thing I've enjoyed is really working through mentalities that I had that I'm realizing like actually that wasn't healthy, and like those are one of the things that I'm working through still.
Right.
You know, and it is unfortunate. I know other people struggle. I can stop saying struggle.
Yeah.
People masturbate and then don't want to talk about it. And I remember in my circle, like I'm like so. Because I always thought I was alone in this. I'm like, does anybody else do this? Or are they just not talking about it? And eventually when I would ask some girls, they'd be like, yeah, I struggle with it, but I don't do that anymore. Like right. Oh, they stopped. Or like I'm like, so do men don't talk about it either. Right, so I'm like, am I the only one? That's how I felt. Right. I just felt like I was the only one.
And when I have, I am in a lot more non-church spaces.
Yeah.
I exist in a lot of queer spaces. And I find that the further, like, masturbation is like a thing that people say, I just had to take care of it. I just was like I today, or like I've seen people on stage talk about it, and I think that removing the taboo like that is an important part of it, because there's absolutely nothing wrong with masturbation.
No, that's so true. And I feel like if we didn't have the taboo, it would be talked about, and we would learn how to become healthier beings instead of suppressing our own desires. Because it's not healthy for someone to be praying, God, take away my sex drive, take away me being turned on, take it all away so that I'm not defiling you like that.
Because it has long-term negative effects that you yourself.
Yeah.
You have any other questions?
I was actually going to ask, like, what do you like? Do you think there are any like ethical issues with like porn? Corn. Sorry.
Corn.
Corn.
Oh, jeez. It's so the algorithm stuff is so. Okay, so this is an interesting question.
Yeah.
Because there's a debate about that.
Yeah.
In religious circles and in progressive religious circles. In progressive religious circles, there's less and less of a debate. There's seems to be much more of a consensus.
Yeah.
And so let me sort of give that side of it, because I think that there are problems with pornography is like well trodden ground that people can. It's easy. Like they've probably heard that before, but like this progressive religious take is is different. And I just find that progressive religious ideas are not as I don't know, are not as dramatic. They don't get the same voice in our culture, even though a lot of people are there.
Yeah.
So the ethics are, the ethics really center around the performers. Now, if you believe that sex is bad, if you believe that that it's only something to even be shared between a husband and a wife, in that more conservative space, then the ethics generally lead you to a place where you say, like, watching another person is problematic. Normally it would be sinful, but like on the other side, it really generally focuses on the performers.
Okay.
And that there are people who are forced into that, or have things shared against their consent, right? So like you are with a partner, you take a video, and then it's revenge corn, right? Yeah. And they post it, and it's not okay, and you feel, you're betrayed, you're exposed, all that kind of stuff. So those ethical concerns, I think, is important, but important to put them in context. So I have known, and I currently know a couple of people who are adult content creators. I am not an adult content creator. Let me make that clear. Yeah. All the people that I have known it's not been something that they felt like they were coerced into. Yeah. It's not something that they felt like they did out of like sort of systemic problems. Like, I got to a place where this was my only option. Right. Right. That was not the case. All of the people that I have known, and of course I'm a white male in America. There's a lot of privilege, and my tribe of people that I've had access to, right? There's a lot of sample bias here. So I'm not extrapolating this to everything, but I'm just saying, I know a number of people, and they basically found there's something that they loved doing that they could make money at. Yeah. And so they got an OnlyFans, whatever, and they had a Twitter. They have a Twitter. Like, they have all the things that whole ecosystem, and they made good money. And some of them still do it. Some of them transitioned out of that. One of them paid for their college with it, and like, they wanted to be a lawyer, but this was an easy way, a fun way to make a good amount of money. Yeah. Now, there are people, 100% are people who are trafficked in that world, who are made to do it, or are at a place where they do feel like that's their only option, or somebody sort of manipulates them into that. That is the case, and that's wrong for that to happen. It's important, though, and so this sort of progressive religious take would say it's important to put that in context, right? And so if you look at the agriculture industry, the food that we eat, there are people that are trafficked into that industry to harvest our baby spinach. Yeah. Right? And that is really wrong. Yeah. It doesn't mean you abstain from eating, and you eating food that you get from a grocery store, and you only grow your own food. That's an option. Yeah. The garment industry, there are people who are trafficked and enslaved that made probably this t-shirt, right? This is just a random t-shirt that was probably made by, in some way, and it is wrong.
Yeah.
Deeply wrong. But, and this is an interesting thing. Just avoiding making your own clothes is a thing that you can do, but making your own clothes actually doesn't stop the problem.
Right.
Like cooking, or like growing your own food doesn't stop the problem.
Right.
And making this like huge categorical boycott actually doesn't impact the problem. If the problem is trafficking, then you need to call out trafficking. You need to produce ways to report trafficking. You need to like all of these things, so that the trafficking is dealt with.
Yeah.
In any industry, including the adult industry. And same thing with the revenge stuff.
Yeah.
Right. You have to have, if you don't talk about it, if you don't deal with the actual problem is not the adult content creation.
Yeah.
The problem is the revenge thing.
Yeah.
So you've got to, but if you don't talk about it, if you just say like, don't watch any of it, then we aren't addressing the problem.
Right.
And so there is an ethical concern with an all-out boycott as well. Right. Because that means that you aren't engaging in the actual problems. You aren't fixing the actual problems. So, so I would say that it's your own ethics. Like, do you feel like this is inherently wrong? Because like, just like there's ethical garment makers, there's ways to find out, and you can find out ethical food sources, and you can even find out ethical adult content sources. There are places that specialize in that. You can choose those routes. And I think it's also something that it's really also a relational thing. Yeah. Talking to your partner and saying like, how do you feel about that? How do I feel about that? Like, what feels okay and what feels not okay? Because for some people, it's a really great and healthy part of their relationship. Yeah. And for some people, it's really not. And it would represent a violation of that relationship to engage in that. And so I think the ethical standards really lie in those realms. Yeah. And in like personally how you feel. So it's like a self ethic. Like, am I causing myself to feel I'm doing something wrong? Like, then I should not. And maybe I should go to therapy too. But like, yeah.
Wait, so can I follow up?
Sure, please.
So do you feel like, because you were stating like the problem, right? Like, do you feel like the legalization of sex work would kind of maybe mediate that problem a bit as a progressive religious person? Or do you feel like you don't have a right to have an opinion, or I don't know what you think?
Well, there are places where it's legal. Yeah. And in fact, I had a conversation with somebody who worked in Nevada in one of those places. Yeah. And I didn't visit it or anything. Like I met them in a social gathering, and so they felt that because they had done they'd worked in a legalized place and in a non-legalized place. Mm-hmm. And in the legalized place, there were all sorts of guidelines. Oh. There were all sorts of like regulations that made it safe for the person, for both parties. But it also meant that you could report when something was wrong. Yeah. Whereas when it's illegal, reporting something that's wrong is a little problematic. Right. Right. And you can find that in a lot of illegalized things. So, I'm not qualified to make that assessment. Yeah. I can just say like what other people have told me. Yeah. And, and so I think that, yeah.
Yeah. No, that was insightful. I mean, I just learned something about that. So thank you for sharing.
No problem. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do content recommendations. So our little end segment is like, we did one that was like music that will lead you astray. Yeah. I recommended a Harry Potter series. We're going to do that this time, but with movies that like you would be told, or not necessarily movies, but like media that you would have been told you were going to hell, not because it's pornography, but because like I was around people who were like, if there's nudity, it's wrong.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? If there's a sex scene, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's basically pornography is what they would say. So do you have something that will lead them astray?
Yes, I have one movie that does have nudity in it, and it's called The Vow. I'm not sure if people have seen it. It has Channing Tatum in it. And it's a really beautiful love story. It's actually quite sad, but it's really good though. And I don't want to give too much away. He has a wife. They fell in love, and then she gets into a car accident. She loses her memories for the past 5 years. So that's including her relationship with Channing Tatum.
Oh, wow.
And so the whole movie is him kind of trying to fall back and have his wife fall back in love with him. And it's
that sounds so beautiful.
It's really beautiful movie, but it would have been a big no because there's a scene where Channing Tatum's naked.
Right. So. Oh yeah. I there's a show that I've recently gotten into called Outlander. Outlander is it's this interesting like sci-fi / like I don't know what it's called when it's like a period piece in like the Middle Ages kind of thing. Like it kind of feels like Game of Thrones ish.
Okay.
But there's this like basically a woman from the future touches these old rocks.
Okay.
And she ends up going back in time.
Oh.
And then eventually she goes forward in time. And like, it's a really just interesting, that whole dynamic is really interesting. And there's some really, really hot, like as in, sensual scenes that you would not have been allowed to see. And Jamie is one of the characters, has the best butt on TV, right? Well, maybe second best.
Yeah.
Because there's this movie. There's this movie that really messed me up.
Yeah.
Like I had not understood a lot of things about myself when this happened. But it's this movie, The Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson,
I've seen it.
which is like violent, or just horrifically violent depiction of the crucifixion. And then you get all the way through. It's awful violence, awful, like blood, gore, all the things. And then at the end, it's the Jesus story, the crucifixion. There is a brief moment of the resurrection where Jesus, you don't see all of him, but he like walks by the camera. You see the hole in his hand, and you see his naked butt, and it's just actor Jim Caviezel. But like, the first time I saw that, I was like, "Can we rewind that for just a second?" It made me. He has got a great butt.
Yeah.
And but it's like really problematic because it's Jesus' butt, and like I didn't really know what to do with that. So I'm not recommending The Passion of the Christ. I'm recommending Outlander.
Perfect.
Okay. So we are on live. So if you have questions and answers that you would like to put in the chat, we would we'll answer as much as we can. We're on YouTube. We are on Instagram. We are on TikTok. So I'm going to be looking at the chat in those places. And Hawk said, are we talking about watching adult material or the content itself? So yeah, the watching part, I think, is this question of like this self-ethic and this relational ethic. There's nothing inherently wrong, but again, consuming the content is also related to the content creation and all of that. So yeah, that's, I think, what we were talking about there, Hawk. If you've got questions though, go ahead and put them in. There's always a little bit of a delay between me saying it and it coming out onto the live stream. Oh, I've lost the YouTube stream. So let's get back over there. Yeah. So go ahead and put that in the chat. And I know some of this is a sensitive topics. So if you don't feel comfortable, that's totally okay. Ash says, I'm scared to come out to my church. There are no inclusive churches here. What do I do? Do you want to respond? I'll respond, but go ahead. Just what is your...
That's hard because I've never had...
Yeah.
Wait, come out are you talking about deconstruction or...
No, we're talking about like
being
queer.
Maybe you should answer, yeah.
Well, okay. So Ash, number one, like there's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
Nothing wrong with you. I think clearly it sounds like you've begun to accept yourself. And I understand the idea that there are no inclusive churches because it can be hard to find. And there's a lot of like like the smaller the town is, the less likely you're gonna find one. And so I'd say first, you need to make sure that you're safe.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes people have a coming out that is sort of gradual. It progresses to a larger and larger group over time because of safety.
Yeah.
You might live in a community where you're not physically safe. You might, all of your relational connections might be to these churches, and then that means you're going to lose all of those relationships. And I get that. And so that's one of the things that therapists will say to people is that like you need a safe, if you can't come all the way out, you need a safe person.
Yeah.
You need somebody that you can process with. That's not just a therapist, and hopefully a safe little tribe of people that you can be fully yourself and understand and explore.
Yeah.
But as far as church is concerned, I would also say we have this community that we are part of called Not Church. And it is it's full of people, lots of different religious identities. So that's an important thing just to know. There are definitely Christians there, ex-Christians, people who love Jesus but would not accept the label Christian, and other religious identities as well. But there is an LGBTQ space. There are plenty of queer people there. It is open and accepting. It's people that are trying to engage with God and find spiritual beliefs and practices that work for them and are really there for each other. It's on Discord. If you want to check that out, Ash, I would say go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. It's patreon.com/skepticpastor. It's $3 a month. And it's a faith community, so we don't ask people to give a percentage of their income. But look, Ash, I don't know how old you are. And so if paying $3 a month is a hardship for you, just DM me and I'll get you a free way in. Okay, next one. If we don't want to be theologians, but we want to study the Bible, where should we go to learn? Where do you go to learn? You are not a theologian.
Yeah.
Right.
To study the Bible from an academic point of view? Is that what the question's asking about?
How do you study the Bible?
So I used to study the Bible in a different way. That's why I guess I was clarifying.
Right.
But I guess from an academic point of view, I do it with external books. And so it depends, I guess, what you're interested in. If you kind of are interested in like the history of the Bible, the making of like the canon, how we got it. There's actually a really good book that Jeremy recommended. Uh-huh. It's called History of the Bible, and I forget who. Oh, it's right there.
Yeah.
History of the Bible by John Barton.
Yeah,
which is a very academic type of book. So a lot of
accessible. Like it's not, the language is not super hard to understand.
Sorry, I meant to clarify that it does come from an academic perspective, but it's digestible. So it's definitely something that is for the lay person.
But it's a thick one.
It is.
Right?
It is a thick one. So if you're looking for something a bit thinner, I actually just told Jeremy I finished listening to an audiobook of Dan McClellan's book called The Bible Says So. That was really good. And Dan McClellan provided a lot of data for typical dogmas that we have today. So that's available on audiobook, or you can buy it from anywhere. And so I do with a lot of books, and I also listen to a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
So I guess it just depends on...
And
Yeah.
what we're doing now will be a podcast
Yeah.
on the Unbelief podcast. And so we do 2 episodes a week. One is like a Bible teaching. That's
Yeah.
just me giving you a progressive take on the Bible. And then we do interview stuff like this on deconstruction topics. So that's another option for you. Also, you're on TikTok right now. I'd recommend Dan McClellan. I'd
Great
recommend
guy.
Pete Enns.
Yeah.
ENNS, I think. Both of those are really great sources for that as well. So yeah, girl for Jess. That's our recommendation. Ash has another question. I want to be baptized at my evangelical church. Is it necessary for salvation?
Ooh.
Okay, so in some ways I feel like I can answer this. Some ways I feel like I can't. So I would say that is something that what is salvation, what that means, and what is necessary is something that is disagreed upon by
Yeah.
different faith traditions. And so I am sure your evangelical church says that it is. There are people that disagree with them.
Yeah.
It is an important marker and part of Christianity historically.
Yeah.
That you couldn't sort of be part of the movement without that very early on. But yeah, Ash, I feel like I can just say that some people would say yes and some people would say no. And there's not a consensus, right? Some things I feel like there's a consensus even among progressive people. Some people would say yes, some people would say no. And like the definition of what salvation is, that changes very dramatically from belief system to belief system. All right. FVM 797 says, if homosexuality truly isn't a sin, do you believe God will hold people accountable for teaching that?
Wait, if homosexuality isn't a sin?
Yes. If homosexuality truly isn't a sin, do you believe, I'll ask you, do you believe God will hold people accountable for teaching that?
I want to say yes, and this would be under the assumption that there is a God and there's going to be a judgment day.
Right.
I don't quite know, to be honest.
Right.
I don't know. But if there is, I want to believe that, yeah, you should be held accountable for false teachings that have destroyed lives, to be very
Right.
clear. Has done a lot of damage. I guess it's really then the question is, well, what type of God is he? Is he a God of justice? Like, is that going to matter to him? I don't know. Or to them. Sorry, we should really use they them pronouns. Yeah. So yeah, I feel like I can't really answer because I'm just not sure what's out there right now.
I mean, I'm the same. Like, I don't ascribe to the whole Judgment Day way of interpreting the Bible. I don't. And really, like, I don't have, I don't think the Bible is clear on what happens in the afterlife.
Yeah.
And a lot of what is taught about the afterlife, and it says that it's based in the Bible, when you look at it, when you look at people who really know, biblical scholars like Dan McClellan and Pete Enns, those people, they'll say, like, that's actually not in the Bible.
Right.
And so, do I think maybe the bigger question is, like, do I think that after people die, God holds people accountable with some sort of punishment? And that I don't know.
Yeah.
And if God does that, this is a thing that I would hope that God does. But I feel like I'm not giving you a good answer, but that's part of, I think, looking for data is like, when there's not data, as part of me being a deep skeptic, if there's not data, I'm just going to tell you I don't know.
Yeah.
And there's not consensus around it. Let's see. Ed Sarles says, I don't think God punishes honestly teaching what you believe. Willful ignorance, perhaps. Ash asks, if I'm queer and go to a non-accepting church, should I leave or should I be the change in it? Ash, okay. I've served in the leadership of non-accepting churches. I hate that about my past and my history. It does give me insight into a question like this. And I'd love to hear what you say too. Ash, I would love to think that a 19-year-old queer kid could affect real change in your church. And I don't know about your church. I haven't ever been a part of a non-accepting church, a non-affirming church, or know well enough to know one that a specific 19-year-old queer kid would be able to make a significant change. I can tell you, you will suffer significant pushback and people saying some really horrible homophobic things to you. Don't even attempt it without a great therapist.
Yeah.
But I also know that, yes, should I leave? That's a hard thing as well. And because leaving is probably leaving a lot of people you love, a lot of social connections. And yeah, I don't know if you should leave. That's something you'd have to figure out yourself. And, it's something that you could talk to another affirming Christian about. But yeah, what would you say?
I'll just say it is hard to be a minority in spaces that only serve the majority, the majority, whatever that is, right? Heterosexual people who are white, whatever. I will say for myself, I was a part of a church that had deep racism issues.
Yeah.
And so the congregation was like 98%, really 99% white in a neighborhood that had a lot of minorities, which already is a problem. Your congregation doesn't reflect your neighborhood. Right. Uh-huh. And I was on the worship team, so I was in a leadership position, and I was one of very few minorities serving. And it was really hard because the church wasn't really like for minorities. I mean, I know it's not quite the same, but it's like I didn't feel like it was a safe space for me because the pastor would make comments about, this is a church in DC, when shootings would happen, wouldn't even go to the area, to just be there in support for whoever died. We wouldn't do any type of community work, and we would ask like, hey, can we celebrate Juneteenth? And like, they would be like, no, and give a reason as to why it wasn't. So I'm like, I don't feel safe here. And like a lot of women would speak up who are minorities about how they've been microaggressed and stuff. So, I'll just say what I ended up doing is I left because I couldn't be in a space that just wasn't supportive of my literal identity. I'm half Arab, half Latina. I don't look white.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a decision that you have to make for yourself because I myself also am someone who has lost a lot of my community and friends. But in a sense, like I don't regret it. Like I feel like I wouldn't have been able to fully deconstruct and learn about myself had I not left. It just depends whatever you're comfortable with and whatever decision you feel good and can sleep on at the end of the day. You know?
Yeah.
So that's
sure.
how I'd answer that.
Okay. Halal says, what do you believe about the ethical, not religious, considerations around the corn industry? Safety, etc. So,
didn't we just talk about this?
Yeah, they just joined
okay.
it, which is fine. We can talk about it again.
Cool.
So there's like relational ethics that we talked about, which is like in your relationship with other people, with your partner, being able to say like, what are they comfortable with? What are you comfortable with? And that's an important part of that relational ethic, and a self ethic too of like, what do I feel comfortable with? And if you have, and you might have some religious trauma around it, you should go to therapy probably. But around the industry itself. So, disclaimer, right? I'm a white male, middle class, right? And So my pool of relational connections is limited. This is a limited sample, but I know a handful of adult content creators, and none of them were coerced into it. They all actively chose it. For them, they really enjoyed the things that you do, and they realized that they could make money at it, and they really enjoyed their time in that industry. Some of them are still there. And some of them, that was not their long-term life goal.
Yeah.
One of them paid for law school. They wanted to be a lawyer, and they made a lot of money and could work, whenever they wanted to. And so yeah, I think that's important to understand that it's not everything.
Yeah.
And there are people that are trafficked into it. That's a real problem. It's an ethical concern. But the other thing is that you've got to pull out and realize that there are people trafficked into picking the food that you eat. There are people trafficked into the garments that you wear, right? And so there are ethical concerns with eating stuff from the grocery store or buying clothing. Right. And it's the same ethical concern, just different industries.
Right.
And then there's like the revenge corn where somebody is uploading that to a with a partner. They take a video and then they break up and they post that. That's also problematic. One of the things that I think is the absolute boycott of it actually doesn't fix these problems.
Right.
Ignoring it, completely boycotting it altogether doesn't fix the problem. It may fix your problem with it.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to be, but like it's an industry, and that industry like has these problems. And if everybody just ignores it, then there needs to be things in place to deal with trafficking. There needs to be things in place to deal with revenge. In the same way that like just choosing to grow your own vegetables or your own food doesn't actually fix the problem in the agriculture industry. Right. And so I feel like I don't think it's black and white. I think there are ethical concerns in there. And just like you can find ethically harvested food, you can find ethically made clothing. You can also find ethical corn. And so, yeah, I feel like that's the non-religious answer for me. Do you have anything to add?
I think you summed it up pretty well.
Okay, let's see. We've got a couple of other questions. I'm the visible ally at my less accepting church with a rainbow pin, hoping to help others. I'm so glad that you are that, Ed. Those people really help. Looking for another question. Let's see. Girls for girls. I'm looking for. I can't see what you were asking about what was answered. We've answered all the questions that I've seen. How can I add the Bible to my life without taking it literally?
I can start that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think one thing that I feel like I have learned from my deconstruction and listening honestly to the Unbelief podcast, which is so different than what I was taught, was choosing a spirituality that works for you.
Yeah.
So therefore, when you read the Bible, you can decide what you want to follow from it and what you don't want to follow.
Right.
You know, if you want to follow the things that talks about love, like Romans 8 is a great chapter about how to put love in practice, in Romans 9, I believe, really loving your neighbor and just treating people with kindness and respect. Great. But if I don't want to follow the stuff it says about condemning people who are gay, I don't need to do that, And so I think one thing when I first started talking to my therapist that was really helpful, she said, you should make a list of what you believe, what you believe and beliefs that you just don't agree with or like. And then you can decide and see where you're at with, what scriptures you do want to follow, and which ones you don't want to. And when you read the Bible, you can just take the pieces that have really significantly impacted you.
Yeah.
Right?
I love that way of thinking about it. I would say, so the Bible, it's not univocal.
It's not.
And I think when you look at, you said, adding the Bible to your life, the Bible is a library. So it's like going to a library. You can find different books and use those books and put them back on the shelf and get another book.
Yeah.
And so I would say, if you want to begin to add the Bible back into your life, look for the books that resonate with you.
Yeah.
If you want to read about dysfunctional families and how even dysfunctional families, some good things can come out of them, but they're also horrible.
Yeah.
Book of Genesis.
Great book.
Right? All about dysfunctional families. If you're in a negative place, a hard place in your life, and you're sort of feeling hopeless and need something to echo that, the book of Ecclesiastes is a really great book. If you want to see sort of the action movie version of the Jesus story that's like just jam-packed from thing to thing, the book of Mark is that. If you like poetry, Psalms is great. It's more of a prayer book than a poetry book, but it's great because it's very raw at times, and it's like this idea of like, oh man, I can express all the things to God. And yeah, I just find a book that works for you and start there. Okay, last last question. Let me see. I want to make sure that we don't ignore Instagram, and we'll do a can I add new practices like crystals or candles to me being a Christian?
I feel like you could do whatever you want.
Right.
You know, that's kind of my response to that. If you want to add crystals, why not? Like, I think maybe one of the reasons why we ask is because, at least in Christianity, or conservative Christianity, I should say, we're very much taught binaries, like black and white. Like, it has to be right or wrong, heaven or hell, you know, XYZ, whatever.
Right.
And so, like, we don't get a chance to explore the gray area, or to read other ancient texts, to do other types of spiritual practices. I think you should explore and see at the end of the day what you enjoy, what you like. Some people combine a lot. Other people choose to, I don't know, take pieces from something and they make spirituality works for them. Yeah. So I say, sure, you should. And that's
one of the things that I love about our not church community is there's all these different people, and like even ones that would still consider themselves Christian. There's a whole conversation about tarot, and there's all kinds of different practices that people are engaging in that helps them connect with God. And my feeling is, if it helps you to connect with God, as a spiritual person, like, find the beliefs and practices that work for you, right? And if it works for you, yes, do the crystal thing. Yeah. If it doesn't, if that seems weird or whatever, you don't have to do that. Yeah. And so do what works for you. Okay. So, I see there's a lot more questions. You said, just real quick, I asked about crystals and candles because the Bible is against New Age practices. The Bible's not against New Age practices. Let's just be clear. Yeah. New Age practices is now. The Bible is then. The Bible doesn't address these practices. And in fact, the Bible actually opens us up to more things. Paul in the book of Acts actually quotes pagan scripture as God's voice. Yeah. So he's validating God's voice in the things of another religion. So like it's a breaking forth of that. So I would just say I just don't agree with I don't personally agree with it, and I think biblical scholars would say yes, no. The Bible is all the things in the Bible are addressing things that in that moment, and it's not pointing outward all the way to today. You have to make that connection yourself. You have to understand what it was referring to, and then figure that modern application out. You want to say anything before we say goodbye?
That I thought that's a great way to think about it. Yeah. So
cool.
I think I'm good.
All right. Thank you guys. All this stuff goes on the Unbelief podcast. And you can just Google Unbelief Podcast. And then our Not Church community, you can join that by going to skepticpastor.com, or sorry, patreon.com/skepticpastor, patreon.com/skepticpastor, $3 a month. We charge is pay for what you get in this faith community because we've all been traumatized around people manipulating us out of money. So $3 a month will get you part of that community. It's really respectful, all kinds of spiritual people and seekers. And I just use the word seekers. That gives me the ick. Yeah. So not like that. Like spiritual people who are wanting to engage with God and with spirituality. I hope to see you there. All right.
There's a lot of people in the comments.